Okay, so this is a lecture on the organization of free response question 2. And this is really your introduction to FRQ2. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, what makes it different than the others, and then I'll task you with this first FRQ assignment. So far, we have focused on FRQ3. That is colloquially known as the open response. It's where you're going to be asked to make a general thematic assertion about some play or novel, sometimes a poem. And we're going to do FRQ1 next week, where it will definitely be a poem. That's the poetry analysis. But I wanted to touch FRQ2. FRQ2 is colloquially known as the prose passage or the prose analysis. And they'll always give you about a page, 500 to 700 words of a play or a fictional piece, sometimes nonfiction, but very rarely. And you, the reader, are asked to quickly annotate and write an essay about this piece. As I said in the lecture on Sunday, this is new criticism. This is the way that they want you, the reader, to be able to come to text without any context, without any research or understanding of where this is coming from, and yet to make really interesting conclusions about that piece. It's a collegiate skill, to be sure. It's also just a college and workplace skill, because so often in very many different fields, you just have to consume a lot of reading, and you have to be able to quickly synthesize and make meaning from that reading. I see my sister-in-law do this all the time. She's a hospitalist. She's a doctor. She has to read so much all day, every day. Often she has some context for what she's reading, and sometimes she doesn't, and she has to make these quick conclusions. So I like the open. I do. I think it calls for such creativity from us as readers. But this, the prose analysis, is perhaps more likely to be something that you encounter sooner rather than later. So FRQ2. The key skill is annotation. So that is a fancy word for note-taking. You, as you read, kind of on the side, taking notes quickly of what it is that you're noticing. The essay is close in that way to the rhetorical analysis essay from AP Language. If you took AP Language, you're not going to be asked about speaker, occasion, purpose in the same way as you are with that essay, but it's the similar task of seeing a piece you might not have seen before, probably haven't seen before, and then having to make some decisions about it. Starting last year, the FRQ2, it's going to ask you, generally speaking, analyze how the author uses literary elements to do something. They used to give you really specific literary terms. They used to say, analyze how the author uses tone and setting to establish point of view, or whatever it might be. So if you're going back and you're looking at sample FRQ2s from previous to 2020, you'll see that specific task language, but it's not like that anymore. And I'll show you a couple examples. The one that you have assigned to you, we'll get into that in a moment, but here's another example from last year. So here's FRQ2. You don't have to read it. I'm just getting you to see the design of it. Similar to ours that you have for today, read the passage carefully, and then in a well-written essay, analyze how the author uses, here's that language, literary elements and techniques to do something, in this case, to represent the complex response of the narrator to the incident at the riverbank. But in ours, let's get into our prompt. I made this, but I made it so that it looks like the test, the view, and the task. Okay, hold on. There it is. All right, so the following dialogue, excerpted from A Doll's House, and I give you a little context, right? You know the context because you read the play, but if you imagine you're doing this on the AP Lit exam, you might not know the play. So it occurs when a husband learns that his wife is entered in a legal business contract, and then through the scene, learns that the debt is forgiven. Quick plot summary. Here's your sentence. In a well-written essay, analyze how Ibsen uses literary elements and techniques to portray Helmer's attitude towards his wife. So the question is going to give you a singular focus. I think interesting things in this passage include Nora's reaction, the way that she is cold. I love the way that she is silent. I think that's worth study. But that's not the ask. That might be incidental to the central argument, but your central argument needs to be about how the author portrays Torvald and the way Torvald feels about Nora. So I don't want you to write the essay. I really just want you to feel what this is like and how this is different. And then I want you to practice the skill of annotation. And here's how I put that in the assignment. We can take a look. You're to get out a sheet of paper as you read the prose passage, as you read the play. And on that workspace, like on your piece of paper, I want you to take notes, annotate, as you read the passage, things that you're seeing, things that are happening on the page with Torvald's attitude towards his wife. Everyone notes differently, and you should note in the way that it works for you, but by the end of it, I want you to identify 3 literary elements or techniques that you see at work in the scene, specifically in regards to Torvald's attitude towards his wife. And then for each small literary element, write 2 to 3 sentences about how it functions in the scene. So no timing here. Take the time you need to get to those 3 literary elements or techniques. And then look at your 3 that you've listed and order them. Build your outline. What would be first? What would be second? What would be third? By the end, you're going to post this onto the DB and in your BGD, and it's going to look like 1, 2, 3 with 2 to 3 sentences next to each one where you're identifying what literary element is interesting to you and what's going on with it. Okay, so here's my example. I'm always hesitant to give examples from the text you're doing because I don't want to take your ideas. So I tried to pick one that was sort of interesting, but maybe not the heart of what's happening. My literary technique of focus is directives and commands. Torvald talks to Nora through didactic commands, through directions, moving her body. Take it off, he says, Nora, take off your shawl, listen to me. And then no fine speeches, please. He kind of cuts her off when she starts to speak up and defend herself. So I say he's accustomed to ordering her around, and he does so here. In his fit of anger, he's still civil. He is, in a way, moral and righteous in that. But he treats her like a lesser being who he can control. And so that's lit technique 1 that I thought was interesting. You'll do this in your own way, on your own terms, 3 of them, please, 2 to 3 sentences for each, and then we'll use that to think about FRQ2 and how it's a little different than the others. And also, more interestingly, you get to think about the play. I think that this is an organization lecture, it's a skill lecture, but the content of this scene is amazing, and it's worth our study. So I look forward to seeing what you have to say.